In a surprising move, ladies and gentlemen, Burkina Faso has just signed a massive health deal worth 147 million United States of dollars, okay, with the United States of America, marking a major shift into the country's foreign policy. The timing couldn't actually be more critical. Only a day before, the nation's defense minister met with Iran's president to discuss new cooperative ventures. These bold actions, just days apart, signals a new direction for the West African state, ladies and gentlemen, specifically Burkina Faso, whose foreign policy has long been considered more cautious and, of course, inward looking. The stakes much higher than anyone could have actually imagined. Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traore specifically, has made a significant change in its international relations. The $147 million health deal with the United States of America aims to actually address critical health challenges in the country. The deal is part of a broader U.S. effort to enhance its health cooperation across Africa. But what makes this agreement stand out is Burkina Faso's previous ties and, of course, recent political moves. Just a day before this agreement, ladies and gentlemen, the country's defense minister was actually in Tehran, the capital city for Iran, discussing cooperation with Iran. This unexpected shift, ladies and gentlemen, is actually catching many by surprise, as Burkina Faso has traditionally been more cautious in its international relations. Burkina Faso's relationship with the US or America has always been distant, but this health deal or agreement marks a significant change. The agreement will actually focus on improving health infrastructure, tackling diseases like HIV/AIDS, malaria, and of course tuberculosis, and increasing emergency preparedness. For many, ladies and gentlemen, the move raises questions. Number one, why now? Number two, why with the US? And of course, what does it actually mean for Burkina Faso's sovereignty or independence? Behind the deal, ladies and gentlemen, there is another layer to uncover. The country's foreign policy strategy. The defense minister's recent visit to Iran, ladies and gentlemen, was not just about security or cooperation. It actually represents a broader trend in Burkina Faso's approach. The country seems to be shifting away from the traditional alliances and, of course, seeking partnership based on immediate or instant benefits, with little regard for ideological alignment. The deal with the US is actually about practical help, immediate aid that actually improves lives without sacrificing sovereignty or independence. Now, ladies and gentlemen, while some countries or states such as Zimbabwe and, of course, Zambia have expressed concerns over sovereignty in similar health deals, Burkina Faso is actually forging ahead with its deals. Now, why the difference in approach? What is driving this political shift? Now, before we actually dive deeper into this, please, this happens to be a Pan-African community where we actually analyze African complex stories like this with you. So make sure that's again to join us now in case you are not yet part. Okay, like, subscribe, and turn on the notification tone. The US Burkina Faso health deal, ladies and gentlemen, is part of a much larger plan for the US to actually expand its footprint, okay, in Africa, especially in the health sector. The agreement is actually part of a broader push to tackle diseases, as I mentioned earlier, like HIV/AIDS, malaria, and of course tuberculosis, which are actually still rampant or common in part of Africa. It is actually clear that the US is actually increasingly investing in the health of African states, yes, starting from Burkina Faso and other parts of the country, the continent. But what makes Burkina Faso's deal different is the timing. Ladies and gentlemen, Burkina Faso is actually not your typical partner for such a deal. In fact, it is one of the more unlikely nations or countries to be a part of this kind of agreement or deal. Historically, Burkina Faso has actually maintained a somewhat neutral stance in international relations. The country has not been at the center of US foreign policy discussions. In the past, in fact, most US foreign aid and investment have actually typically gone to larger or more geopolitically influential African states or countries like Kenya or Nigeria. But why is the deal with Burkina Faso's importance now? Ladies and gentlemen, that is the question. Could it be that the US or America sees Burkina Faso as an emerging leader in West Africa, or is there something deeper at play, or this is something that is more strategic that we haven't actually seen or understood yet? Burkina Faso's foreign policy is actually evolving, and of course the event of the last few days speaking volumes. The country has actually made it clear it will actually work with whoever can actually bring its tangible benefits without compromising its sovereignty. This has actually raised eyebrows in many cycles, ladies and gentlemen, especially in countries like Zimbabwe and of course Zambia, where similar deals with the US have actually stalled due to fears of undermining national autonomy or independence. As Burkina Faso moves forward with the agreement or deal, ladies and gentlemen, the world is actually watching closely. Now, the question is very simple: can this health deal be a new model for partnerships in Africa? or is it just a one-off? Only time will actually tell. As we look deeper into this particular deal, ladies and gentlemen, it becomes clear that it is not just about health. The shift in Burkina Faso's foreign policy could actually have much wider implications. The country's move to strengthen ties with the US or America is actually being seen as part of a larger geopolitical strategy, but that is actually focused on pragmatism, okay, over ideology. This particular deal or agreement, okay, with America coming just a day after discussions with Iran suggests that Burkina Faso is actually looking to balance multiple partnerships and of course secure what it actually needs in a volatile world. The twist here is that Burkina Faso has really seems to be playing a long game, choosing partners based on mutual benefits and of course ignoring political alignment. This transactional approach could actually signal a shift in African foreign policy dynamics, ladies and gentlemen, especially as more countries or states in Africa look to strengthen ties with both the West and of course non-Western partners. So far, responses or reactions to the deal have been mixed, ladies and gentlemen. Supporters argue that it is actually a smart move for a nation or country in need of urgent health assistance, with the US providing much needed resources, ladies and gentlemen. However, critics or enemies warn that these kinds of deals could actually lead to an erosion of sovereignty, even if they actually don't appear to do so immediately. The US has actually shown or demonstrated clear support for Burkina Faso's decision, ladies and gentlemen, citing the mutual benefits of the health agreement. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, some in the African Union has actually voiced concerns, particularly regarding how this could actually affect the continent's broader or bigger geopolitical balance. Still, Burkina Faso is actually moving ahead, and it is actually clear that its strategy is to actually prioritize its own immediate needs. The impact of this deal won't be known right away, but one thing is actually certain: Burkina Faso has actually set a new precedent for other African states or countries. Now, the question is very simple: will they actually follow suit? Okay, Burkina Faso's 147 million health deal with the US or America is actually more than just an agreement. It is actually a statement of intent. Okay, the country is actually showing their wealth that it will actually partner with anyone who can actually help it achieve its goals without compromising its sovereignty. So thank you so much for spending a precious time of you watching this video step by step. Don't forget to actually like, subscribe. That is when you have not actually done it already, so that we can actually stay tuned in this particular same community and discuss African important and official development like this with important people like you every single day.